Once again, the Queen of Consorts surprises us, but not in a good way.
Made lurid and false claims about the royal family, which played on her fears and fueled paranoia.
4 minutes ago, a palace door became the dividing line between royal duty and open rebellion. Queen Camilla arrived carrying a directive bearing a title she had been expressly forbidden to use, and demanded that stunned officials restore her access immediately. Prince William reached the corridor moments later. He read the signature, looked directly at his stepmother, and erupted. What followed was not a disagreement over protocol. It was a battle over who could still command the monarchy. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William had entered Buckingham Palace expecting a strategy meeting, not a test of authority. Household officials were waiting behind doors to decide which engagements could continue, while Charles carried a reduced workload. A royal strategy meeting is a closed discussion where palace staff coordinate duties, messages, and access to information. That made Camilla's arrival dangerous. She was not merely asking to attend. She was demanding the power to shape decisions made during the king's vulnerable absence. Camilla stopped before 2 guards and placed the directive in front of them. She ordered them to unlock the doors. Beneath the command appeared the signature, Her Majesty the Queen, a designation meaning the formal style attached to the sovereign's wife, but one she had been privately barred from using as independent executive authority. The guards hesitated. Then William arrived, took the page, and struck it against his palm. "Who authorized this?" he demanded. Camilla did not retreat. She kept one hand on the handle and told the prince that she would not be erased from the crown by a man who had not yet become king. The crown, in this context, meant the monarchy's governing authority, rather than a physical object. William heard something alarming beneath her defiance, an attempt to turn Charles's weakness into her own command. The directive proved that the confrontation had been planned. Its second order restored Camilla's former office, reassigned staff to her service, reopened confidential correspondence, and returned palace briefings to her desk. William read each line. Then his expression changed. Small initials appeared in the lower corner, the mark of a trusted household official who had helped prepare and circulate the order. Camilla watched him recognize the betrayal. She lowered her voice before the doors closed and delivered one warning. Charles knew far more about the directive than his son understood. William had stopped her at the threshold, but those words transformed fury into fear. If the king had approved even part of this return, the struggle was no longer outside the meeting room. It had already reached his father. Behind the titles stood 3 people bound together by loyalty, resentment, and a history none of them could escape. William believed he was protecting his father and the future crown. Camilla believed she was defending the position she had sacrificed decades to reach. Charles, physically and emotionally exhausted, faced the possibility that his wife and heir were no longer fighting over protocol. They were fighting over which of them truly understood what the king needed, and whom he still trusted. William had gradually taken on greater responsibility whenever his father's health forced him to reduce his public workload. The future crown meant more than the throne he would inherit. It represented the duties, authority, and stability he was expected to protect. Every briefing placed the prince closer to decisions once handled only by Charles. Yet every new responsibility also made the son fear that someone might use the monarch's exhaustion to secure approval he would never have given at full strength. Camilla felt those changing boundaries closing around her. Her access to private correspondence had narrowed. Members of her staff had been reassigned. Her ceremonial precedence had been questioned, and confidential briefings no longer reached her without direct authorization. Ceremonial precedence is the official order determining where royal figures stand, sit, and appear during formal events. To the Queen, these were not harmless adjustments. Each restriction felt like another warning, that her importance depended entirely upon Charles remaining strong enough to defend it. William entered a side chamber and loosened his tie with shaking fingers. Catherine watched him place the disputed directive on a table, then heard him admit that he felt forced to protect his father from decisions the king might be too tired to challenge. The Princess of Wales, William's wife and the woman expected to become queen beside him, understood his fear. But she also recognized the danger inside his anger. Catherine told him that stopping an unauthorized command was necessary, but publicly humiliating Camilla could wound Charles more deeply than either of them understood. William looked down at the forbidden signature. He wanted to believe firmness would protect the monarch. Instead, his wife's warning made him wonder whether his fury had already turned a political crisis into a family betrayal. Camilla returned to her private rooms and slowly removed her gloves. According to an aide's documented account of their conversation, she asked whether William had looked frightened or merely furious. The aide hesitated. That silence broke her composure. She insisted Charles had once promised that no courtier, advisor, or future king would reduce her to a ceremonial figure while he remained sovereign. Then William received the detail that changed everything. A private diary entry from the duty secretary confirmed that Charles had met Camilla alone the previous evening, with no secretaries present and no formal record created. The prince immediately requested an audience. His father refused. That refusal forced William to look backward, toward the ceremony where Camilla first crossed the line and made this confrontation inevitable. The forbidden directive did not begin in a palace corridor. Its origins lay 3 weeks earlier, during a private memorial ceremony, where one unexpected announcement silenced an entire room. Camilla heard herself introduced under a form of authority that had already been removed from the approved program. William immediately looked toward the king. Charles said nothing. That silence became permission in one person's eyes, betrayal in another's, and the first unmistakable step toward a confrontation no advisor could contain. Tension had followed Charles through every week of his reduced schedule. Camilla believed her increased public duties gave her the right to influence household operations, while William insisted that support did not equal independent command. A royal consort is the sovereign's spouse, expected to support the monarch without possessing the monarch's governing authority. That distinction mattered because the queen was no longer asking only to represent her husband. She was beginning to act as though his absence transferred part of his power directly to her. William's advisors had approved the wording Queen Camilla for official introductions. The title identified her position while reserving sovereign language, the words that signal the reigning monarch's authority. For Charles alone, everyone involved had received the approved program. Nothing appeared uncertain. Yet 20 minutes before the ceremony began inside St. George's Hall, one handwritten instruction quietly changed the meaning of the entire event. The master of ceremonies stepped forward and introduced Camilla as Her Majesty the Queen, acting with the full authority of the crown. A master of ceremonies is the official responsible for announcements and the order of a formal event. The crown meant the legal and governing authority exercised by the sovereign. William immediately turned toward his father, expecting him to correct the words. Instead, Charles lowered his eyes to the printed program and remained silent. Camilla walked forward with quiet confidence. The king's failure to object felt like approval to her, but it felt like betrayal to his son. Later, William stopped her in a private passage and demanded an explanation. She calmly told him that the wording merely recognized the burden she had already carried during Charles's reduced duties. "Support is not sovereignty," William replied. Camilla stepped closer. She warned the prince that authority could not be inherited early through impatience, and he answered that it could not be seized through an altered introduction either. Neither raised a voice. Yet both understood that the argument had moved beyond ceremony and into succession, trust, and the limits of loyalty. The master of ceremonies later confessed, during a recorded private interview with palace investigators, that Camilla's office had delivered the revised wording 20 minutes before the event. His documented account included the handwritten instruction and the same unusual initials later found on the corridor directive. William ordered the internal trail examined immediately. The result was chilling. The unidentified collaborator had direct access to Charles's private correspondence. What began as a disputed introduction now looked like an organized campaign, and the prince was ready to confront Camilla without witnesses or ceremony. The room was cleared in less than a minute. No secretaries, no advisors. No one remained to soften the language or deny what was said. William placed the forbidden directive between himself and Camilla and demanded that she withdraw it in writing. She remained standing. Then he spoke the accusation that shattered the last trace of restraint between them. She had taken the king's silence, converted it into authority, and tried to use his crown against his own heir. William had chosen a small private audience room far from Charles's apartments. A private audience room is a secure chamber used for confidential royal conversations without public or household interruption. The prince wanted to prevent his father from being pulled into the confrontation before he understood who had altered the memorial wording. Yet keeping the monarch away also meant nobody could settle the argument once anger took control. Camilla looked at the two documents lying together. The corridor directive rested beside the earlier memorial instruction, and both carried matching language, identical formatting, and the same mysterious initials. William pushed the pages toward her. "You will not use my father's crown against him," he said. Camilla refused to touch them. She asked whether William had appointed himself guardian of the king, then accused him of using Charles's reduced strength to expand his own authority. The future king's expression hardened, but his voice dropped. He said he was not trying to replace his father. He was trying to stop others from cornering a tired monarch into decisions he might never make freely. Camilla struck back. She insisted Charles had personally restored her authority and told her to continue working in his place. William asked for the king's signed approval. Silence followed. The queen offered no authenticated order, no witnessed instruction, and no formal record carrying the sovereign's consent. Then Camilla opened her handbag and produced a handwritten note. Charles had written only 6 words. "You must continue where I cannot." She called it permission. William called it an intimate reassurance twisted into an executive command. An executive command is an instruction intended to control staff, access, or official decisions. To him, affection had been deliberately transformed into power. William then identified the initials. A documented internal staffing record connected them to Sir Adrian Vale, the deputy household secretary who had quietly moved between Charles's office and Camilla's team. A deputy household secretary is a senior official who helps manage royal schedules, correspondence, and internal instructions. Sir Adrian possessed the access needed to prepare both documents and the trust required to move them without immediate challenge. Camilla finally lifted the directive. For one tense moment, William expected her to tear it apart. Instead, she folded it once and returned it to the table. She would not withdraw it. William immediately ordered Sir Adrian's palace access suspended, but the order came too late. The official had already delivered a sealed file to Charles. Neither William nor Camilla knew what it contained, and that file would decide whether the prince had protected his father or dangerously overstepped as heir. Royal power rarely announces itself with raised voices. It moves through keys, seals, schedules, signatures, and the people trusted to carry them. By suspending one official, William had interrupted Camilla's return, but he had also entered dangerous territory. Only Charles could settle the central question. Had his private words genuinely empowered his wife, or had those words been reshaped into something he never intended? When the sealed file reached him, the king's reaction answered only half of that question. Charles dismissed his attendants and opened Sir Adrian's file alone. The royal household depends upon authenticated instructions, orders whose source and approval have been formally verified. Because rank alone does not permit someone to control staff, correspondence, or confidential access. Every major command required the monarch's explicit consent. Without that safeguard, private affection could be turned into public authority, exactly as the king now feared had happened. The sealed pages contained Camilla's complete restoration plan. Her former office would reopen, selected staff would return, confidential briefings would reach her desk, and her ceremonial precedence would be strengthened. Ceremonial precedence means the official order that determines a royal figure's place and importance at formal events. Sir Adrian had drafted every step before the Queen ever approached the corridor, proving that her attempted return was planned well in advance. Charles slowly removed his glasses. Disappointment crossed his face as he read how his 6 handwritten words had been expanded into a claim of institutional power. He felt betrayed by that transformation. Yet the monarch also felt wounded by William, who had confronted his wife and suspended an official before seeking his father's judgment. One side had stretched his words. The other had acted as if his silence no longer mattered. William entered expecting support. Instead, Charles asked why his son had treated Camilla like an intruder in her own home. The prince answered carefully. She had not arrived as a wife requesting entry, he said. She had arrived behaving like a sovereign and carrying orders issued under authority that belonged to the king alone. Charles confirmed the truth in a recorded private conversation preserved by his secretary after the meeting. He had told Camilla to continue where I cannot, but he meant public reassurance, charitable duties, and companionship during his reduced schedule. He had never authorized her to reopen offices, command staff, or control confidential crown business. Crown business means the official work performed under the reigning monarch's authority. The king reached for his fountain pen. He drew a hard line through Sir Adrian's restoration plan and wrote 3 decisive words across the page. No authority conveyed. His hand paused before he signed, as though the signature wounded him more deeply than the deception itself. William felt vindicated for only a moment. Charles pushed the rejected plan toward him and ordered the future king to deliver it personally to Camilla and remain present for her response. The prince had received the ruling he wanted, but the price was cruel. He now had to carry his father's rejection directly to the woman who believed the monarch had promised never to abandon her. The consequences arrived without trumpets or public declarations. A keycard stopped working. A briefing folder was removed. 2 members of staff were quietly reassigned. For Camilla, the new reality revealed itself through small, merciless details. Then William entered carrying Charles's signed decision. She searched his expression for triumph and found none. That absence of satisfaction made the moment more painful, because it confirmed that this was no longer a personal victory. It was a boundary drawn by the king himself. Charles's written ruling cancelled the restoration directive, restricted Camilla's access to executive briefings, and barred her from using the standalone queen title to command the household. Executive briefings are confidential updates used to coordinate official duties, staff, security, and royal decisions. The order mattered because it preserved her public position while removing the independent authority she had attempted to claim. She would remain beside the monarch, but she could no longer speak as though she were the monarch. Sir Adrian remained suspended, while an internal review examined his conduct. An internal review is a confidential investigation into whether palace rules or positions of trust were misused. The king also separated the 2 offices. The official had tried to reconnect. New authentication procedures required every sensitive instruction to carry verified approval, preventing another private message from being transformed into a royal command. Camilla approached her former office and pressed her keycard against the reader. The light flashed red. She tried again, slower this time, before standing completely still. A young equerry offered to escort her back to her rooms. An equerry is a royal assistant who handles personal duties and official arrangements. She thanked him quietly, but the humiliation had already landed. William found her moments later and handed over Charles's signed decision. Camilla read, "No authority conveyed," once, then again. She asked whether the king had been looking at his son when he signed it. The prince answered honestly. His father had looked exhausted, not angry. Camilla's fury faded. Charles had not rejected the plan to punish her. He had rejected it because her actions had become another burden he could no longer carry. According to William's documented account of their private conversation, she then revealed that Sir Adrian had repeatedly assured her the handwritten note was enough. The official had also warned that the future king planned to remove her from every meaningful royal role. William placed the completed correspondence review beside the ruling. It proved that Sir Adrian had exaggerated his plans to Camilla while telling him that she intended to seize greater authority. The same man had fed both of their deepest fears, then watched distrust do the rest. Camilla opened her writing case, removed the unauthorized queen seal, and placed it beside Charles's decision. She promised never to use it again. William did not leave. He closed the door and asked, "Why didn't you speak to me before you did this?" With the title surrendered and the intermediary exposed, their struggle moved beyond power, into the private wound that had made them so easy to divide. For the first time since the crisis began, there were no officials between them, no documents on the table, and no royal titles spoken aloud. William and Camilla sat opposite each other as two members of one damaged family. He wanted to understand why she had crossed the line. She wanted him to understand what disappearing from royal life felt like after decades spent fighting for acceptance. Their conversation did not create affection. It created something more useful, an end to deliberate misunderstanding. William closed the door and remained alone with her. Neither could rely on Charles, palace staff, or protocol to carry difficult words between them. Protocol means the formal rules controlling royal conduct, access, and public roles. Those rules had established the disputed boundary, but they could not explain the fear beneath Camilla's actions, or the anger that had driven the prince to confront her so fiercely. Camilla answered his question slowly. According to William's documented account, written immediately after their conversation, she believed every locked door and cancelled briefing proved he intended to erase her before Charles was gone. Her voice broke when she admitted she could not bear being treated as temporary again. She had spent decades fighting for acceptance, and the shrinking of her role felt like the beginning of another public rejection. William listened without interrupting. Then he confessed that watching his father grow weaker had changed him. Every request placed before the king now felt dangerous. Every person asking Charles for greater access seemed to be taking something from a man who lacked the strength to resist. The future king admitted that suspicion had consumed his judgment, even when the person asking was his father's wife. Camilla apologized for turning a private note into a claim of royal authority. She accepted that affection was not permission and that reassurance was not command. William acknowledged the apology, but his answer remained firm. The Forbidden Queen title could never again be used to control staff, briefings, or palace decisions. William then showed her Sir Adrian's correspondence. The documented messages proved the official had told each of them a different story. Sir Adrian warned the Queen that she would lose every meaningful duty, while convincing the prince that she intended to seize wider power. Camilla recognized phrases taken directly from her private conversations. Her insecurity had not merely been observed. It had been collected, reshaped, and weaponized. Together they drafted a short statement for Charles. Camilla would retain her public and charitable work, but every executive instruction, an order affecting official operations, would require the king's authenticated approval. William would protect that boundary without treating her dignity as a threat. Camilla hesitated before asking whether Charles was ashamed of her. William answered honestly, "He is hurt, but he still asked whether you had eaten." That small detail achieved what authority could not. It reminded her that the monarch's rejection of the order was not rejection of his wife. Their fragile settlement survived behind closed doors. But news of the corridor confrontation had already escaped, and by morning, one photograph would force the monarchy to explain everything those doors had concealed. At sunrise, Britain saw the image the palace had hoped would remain private. Camilla stood before a secured door, one hand gripping the handle, while William faced her with the forbidden directive raised between them. The photograph contained no sound, yet it seemed to capture the entire confrontation: defiance, fury, and a monarchy divided by a single title. Within an hour, crowds gathered, broadcasters interrupted programming, and the palace's private settlement became a national judgment. A corridor photograph taken by an accredited pool photographer appeared across front pages and digital broadcasts. A pool photographer is an approved journalist who records events on behalf of several media organizations when space or security is restricted. Staff had cleared the corridor moments later, but the camera had already preserved the instant when a private family struggle became impossible to contain. Buckingham Palace issued a short statement confirming that an unauthorized directive had been rejected. The announcement offered no details about Charles's private note, the argument between his wife and son, or Sir Adrian's manipulation. That silence mattered. Without the full story, the public judged a single frozen moment instead of the painful agreement reached afterward. Crowds gathered beneath the palace balcony before midday. One woman raised a handwritten sign reading, "One crown, one authority," while another called for compassion toward Camilla. The disagreement moved through the crowd like a wave. Some believed William had defended the monarchy. Others saw a frightened wife being publicly humiliated after years of service beside the king. A fictional morning newspaper placed the photograph beneath the stark headline, "The Queen Who Knocked Twice." Its broadcast interview framed the confrontation as Camilla's failed attempt to reclaim power. The phrase spread rapidly, turning a complicated crisis into a simple national verdict. She had tried to cross a forbidden boundary, and the future king had stopped her. William watched the coverage with Catherine. The Princess of Wales, his wife and closest private advisor, noticed him tense whenever commentators praised his fury. He told her they were celebrating the worst part of him, not the restraint that followed. Catherine reminded him that the public had seen the confrontation, but not the conversation that ended it. Camilla read the same front page alone at breakfast. She folded the newspaper inward until the photograph disappeared, then instructed her staff not to defend her publicly. The Queen understood that any personal response would reopen the conflict Charles had worked to close. Charles finally authorized the release of their joint agreement through a recorded palace statement. It confirmed that the king had made the final ruling, that his wife had accepted the limits placed upon her authority, and that William had not acted as sovereign. Sir Adrian's fate followed. The documented internal review proved he had distorted private conversations to provoke conflict between the Queen and the heir. His suspension became permanent, and Sir Adrian lost all palace access. That evening, Charles summoned William and Camilla together. Public anger had exposed their fracture. Now only the monarch could decide whether its final image would be punishment, reconciliation, or permanent division. The final meeting lasted less than 20 minutes, yet it settled what days of anger had left uncertain. Charles sat between his wife and his son, with neither advisors nor officials in the room. Before him rested the forbidden seal, the rejected directive, and the agreement William and Camilla had written together. The king did not ask who had won, He asked whether they understood what their battle had nearly cost, and then he delivered a verdict neither would ever forget. Charles began with Camilla. She would remain queen through rank, marriage, and public position. But she could never use the standalone designation as an independent source of executive authority. Executive authority means the power to command staff, control access, or direct official business. Her title represented service beside the sovereign. It did not transfer the sovereign's powers to her. William received an equally firm boundary. His expanded responsibilities allowed him to protect confidential operations and advise his father, but they did not make him king before his time. The heir is the person next in line to inherit the throne, not a second monarch already entitled to exercise it. Charles warned that future authority could become just as dangerous as present rank when either was used without restraint. The king lifted the unauthorized seal and placed it inside a small red dispatch box. A dispatch box is a secure case used to carry confidential royal papers. He turned the key and declared that no title, held now or inherited later, could ever be used to bypass trust. Camilla apologized directly for misusing his private words. Charles told her that affection had never meant permission, but he took her hand as he spoke. The gesture carried his final answer. Rejecting her directive did not mean rejecting their marriage. The queen had lost the command she attempted to claim, yet she had not lost her husband. William apologized next. He admitted that fury had spoken before compassion, and that protecting his father had become an excuse to treat Camilla's fear as an attack. The monarch reminded him that defending the crown also meant protecting the dignity of those who made mistakes within it. Charles then confirmed Sir Adrian's permanent dismissal through a documented royal order. Sir Adrian would hold no palace position, retain no confidential access, and exercise no influence over either office. The manipulated restoration plan was voided, while a written chain of authority, clear rules identifying who may approve each decision, replaced the uncertainty he had exploited. William opened the door when the meeting ended. Camilla paused, met his eyes, and walked through without a directive, a command, or a forbidden title between them. The prince had not defeated the queen, and she had not reclaimed independent power. Both had surrendered the fears that allowed manipulation to divide them. Charles remained sovereign, William remained heir, and Camilla remained his wife and queen. Love could offer comfort, rank could provide status. But neither could place anyone above accountable authority. The forbidden seal remained locked away. The family left wounded but reconciled, and the crown emerged steadier because its final boundary had been drawn. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.